Thanks to everybody that's on the call this morning for joining us. And I'd ask that our presenters this morning go ahead and bring up your videos now. We'll go ahead and get the program started today. I want to welcome everybody to our 2020 Partners in Education Breakfast. This is certainly unlike any that we've ever done before. Annually, whenever we do this, we usually get together at the J.D. McCarty Center. We have a wonderful, robust breakfast. A lot of fellowship goes on, and we provide a wonderful opportunity for the business community to connect directly with the principals of each of our school sites, along with our district administration. Talk about success stories and ways that the business community can really engage and help out our students, teachers, and administrators throughout the coming school year. And during this time, we knew we were going to have to pivot and make a little bit of different look this year for our breakfast. And we even talked months ago about particularly doing a panel, much like what you're going to see this morning. But we chose not long ago to go ahead and do the complete event online, just to ensure that we can do this safely and still engage with our district and let our businesses figure out how best they can serve our students and teachers during this school year. But before we get into the questions, which, by the way, thanks to everybody for submitting questions. As you likely know, we made that option available for this, so you were able to email in questions to us, and we have a lot to get through in the next hour, so we will do our best to hopefully get to as many of those as possible. But before we do that, I really want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for today's event. And while this looks different, we still greatly appreciate the investment of our business sponsors. So give me just a moment to recognize each of these, and the list is not short, so please bear with me, and thanks to all of these. Okay, so our gold sponsors are MA Plus Architecture, Walmart, Armstrong Bank, Moore Norman Technology Center, Manhattan Construction, Cox, LWPB Architecture. Those are our gold sponsors. Our silver sponsors are Architects in Partnership, Arvest Bank, Bank First, First Fidelity Bank, Fowler Honda, Great Nations Bank, OG&E, Julia Chu State Farm, Oklahoma Electric Cooperative, RCB Bank, Pioneer Library System, Silver Star Construction, Sooner Bowl, and Westwood Veterinary Hospital. So huge thank you to each of them for partnering with us this morning to make this event happen. We couldn't do it without them and their continued support. So to begin with, let me, recognize the folks that are on the call this morning that we're getting ready to hear from. So we have our Superintendent, Migliorino, with us, and two of his assistants, Holly Nevels and Justin Milner. We thank the three of them for being with us today virtually. And just so everybody knows, we are recording this. We do plan to share this. I think it'll be on our YouTube channel. So if you know somebody that wasn't able to join us this morning, then please encourage them in the not too distant future to go to our YouTube channel, the Chamber's YouTube channel, and we will have the video shared there. So to begin with, Nick, you know, these are really odd, unusual times, something that none of us have ever experienced. I know between the three of you, you've been in public education for a very long time, and you've never experienced a year like this, but it's still really important that the parents, and in this case, we're thinking about businesses this morning, that businesses engage with and are active partners with our schools. But we do that to the benefit of our students, but we want to do that in a way that is safe and that makes sense in light of COVID-19. So the first question this morning is, how can we do that? How can the businesses that are on the line this morning, how can they be engaged with their partners this year?
Am I off mute now?
You're good.
Well, hey, Scott, now that I have an opportunity to say something, I do want to also thank you and the Chamber for hosting this. This is always a tremendous event. I look forward to it each and every year, no matter what the what the agenda is. Really love this event because all the partners get to show up. Principals are there, and when we get to do this in person, and we really just get the opportunity to sit down uninterrupted, have conversations, and just celebrate what we do, which is educate kids. And we all know that takes a village. So I want to thank you and the Chamber for going ahead and hosting this and allowing us to get on here and communicate out with all the patrons. Because you mentioned it, although this is directed towards businesses, those businesses in Norman have employees that have students who are in our schools. So they are not only businesses, they are parents. And we want to work directly with them and give them as much information as we have. And, they support us, we support them, and that's what makes Norman such a great place. So do appreciate that. And I do have to give this one little piece here. The piece I really miss every year is John Kuhn saying he started in his career in 1972, which is the exact same year I was born. So he has no ability to say anything else to rebut what I've just said. But that back and forth each year, I really miss. So John, if you're on this call, there you go. So how old am I this year, and how long have you been doing this? So anyway, with that said, I think the question, now that I've kind of gone off track and you've told me to try to keep everything succinct here, but I haven't modeled that very well. But how can partners help was the question. And I've said this from the beginning: volunteer. We need volunteers. In the state that we're in right now, we've had to limit the volunteers in our buildings. We've had to limit the ability and access to our facilities. But with that being said, we still strategically want volunteers in. We want classroom volunteers. We need classroom volunteers. We need our community to work creatively with our school principals, our site leadership. So when we say we don't allow volunteers or allow guests into the building, that's just the general public. We still want to allow strategically groups to come in to volunteer, to help out, watchdogs, different groups like that to come in and really help support our schools. So I would say reach out to your principals, reach out to your site leadership, reach out to us and volunteer, whether it's to be a guest teacher or to just help out. Let's work strategically together to do just that.
I was lucky last week to drop off my kids at elementary school, and the watchdogs were there assisting them as they were getting out of their vehicle to welcome them to the school day. So I know there are still volunteer needs. So for all of our partners that are on the call, please heed Nick's advice. And if you haven't already, reach out to the site principal that you partner with and please ask them how best you can engage with them. They have a plan in place to do that in a safe way. And so don't let this year go by without connecting and supporting your partner in education. So we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of questions. And I thought what you said was great because, yeah, I'm in charge of the Chamber of Commerce, but I have 4 kids, 3 of which are old enough to be in school. And so I'm regularly on a daily basis concerned and interested in their daily education and safety. And so a lot of the questions we're going to consider today are around that. And I think that's why we have so many people on today's call, because they're genuinely interested in our students' safety and well-being and education. So let's get into this. Nick, to you, is Norman Public Schools still following the Oklahoma COVID-19 alert system?
Off mute again. I'll get this, trying to not interrupt you while you're speaking. But yeah, absolutely. We are following the COVID-19 alert system, and this is something that's defined by the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And what that really means, Scott, is right now, Cleveland County is in orange. And so based on that model, if Cleveland County goes into the red category, that's when we'd look at going to our remote learning again. We exist to educate students. We do that best by doing it in person. And we believe this model gives us the ability to do that while still giving families the choice. But if Cleveland County does go into the red, then we would transition into remote learning. And when I say go into the red, off the top of my head, I believe it's, we're in orange one right now. But if there is one of the triggers that they list on their website, we also have it on our website, and I have them right here. I'll read them. If the region has reached maximum hospital capacity of 100% of the average or licensed staff beds and at least 50% of the contracted beds, that's a trigger. Average days of statewide PPE on hand is less than 5 days, and percent of ventilators is less than 5% statewide. If any one of those triggers hit, then we would go into the red, and then Norman Public Schools would go into remote learning. We work closely with the Cleveland County Health Department on a daily basis. I know we all have each other's cell phone numbers, and we're constantly talking and monitoring that. The news out there, the ICU beds are going up. So obviously we are closely monitoring that. But to your question specifically, yes, we are following that model.
So this was somewhat of a watermark of a week. All the students started back to school full time this week. So how's that going, Nick?
I'll start off. It's going as expected. As I said earlier, we exist to educate students, and our teachers have all been formally trained to educate students in person, and we feel like that's the best way, to educate students is in person. But with that said, we understand families in this time need options. Personally, I still have 2 children in Norman Public Schools, one in high school and one in middle school. And right now my family's split. I have one remote and I have one in person, just because of specific choices my family has made. And that's the same choices I want every family to have the ability to make, is what works best for you in your situation. So when I say, it's going as expected, we anticipated families choosing the virtual option, and we anticipated families choosing the in-person option. And just to kind of give you a picture of what that looks like, approximately 60% on average across our district, students are in person. So 60% of our total enrollment is on person, and about 40% of our enrollment has chosen to either do blended or virtual learning. So that in itself puts a lower number of students in our schools. And I would be remiss, Scott, if I did not say at this time, the safety measures we've put in place, we feel like are working well, but the true safety measures are the adults we have in our building. The hard work from my cabinet, the work they've put in, to the site leadership, and most specifically our teachers. The work our teachers have put into making their rooms as safe as possible can't go unnoticed, and it is incredible. I mean, from my level, from my seat, I truly, truly appreciate their dedication and love for their kids and desire to educate them. So,
Right. So I've looked at a lot of the charts from the State Department of Education and what our local districts put out, and at times it can be a little confusing. So talk to us a little bit deeper into how the determination's made to close individual schools and transition them to remote learning, because that happened a few weeks ago.
no, absolutely. And this is the second model we're following. We had started the school year with one model that we put a lot of thought into, and but we continued to hear from different factions of the community, parents, businesses, and teachers, that we want consistency. And that's what this current model does, is provide consistency for us. But the decision to remove into remote learning, one, we followed the COVID-19 state system. So if that goes red, we would move into remote learning, but what are some of the other scenarios? And with the model we're currently in, it's not an all or nothing, meaning at any individual site, based on positive tests or quarantines, we may have to look at going into a remote learning model. And I think a prime example of that, Scott, is we've already done it once at Irving. We went for one day into a remote learning. There were some positive cases and some people quarantined at that site. There was an anxiety level with some of our staff, and we worked with them to get them back in school, give them the opportunity to feel safe, and then get them back to school. So that was a scenario in which, for one day, the only school in our district, we transitioned them on Sunday for Monday to go into remote learning. And then on Tuesday, we came back and had full-time school. So there's not a cookie cutter approach to this. We look at everything from the numbers of staff that are quarantined to the number of guest teachers we have. Is it, teachers assistants, certified staff? Just there are a bunch of variables that we have to consider. Working with the site leadership and our board, we make that decision site by site, unless obviously Cleveland County goes into the red.
It's challenging. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now in my second graders class, they had a positive case. So 10 out of the 17 had to quarantine from home. And our little girl, she got to go to class and she really wanted to. It was funny. She was like, no, I want to go to school. And so there were 7 kids in their class for 10 or so days. And I think just yesterday they were all back together and she was real excited about it.
So. Scott, I'm going to add in a little bit more. I've had the opportunity to visit almost all of our sites, and just the joy you see in the teachers' faces and the kiddos' faces is incredible when they're back in school and they're actually able to have conversations and see each other. But I have to say, I do dream for the day. I dream for the day that we just are looking at closing school for inclement weather. Those were some of the most stressful times in the past, having to shut down a school district for inclement weather. I long for those days.
Well, I'm longing for a lot of snow sometime soon too, so hopefully that'll happen. But okay, Justin, I'm going to kick a question to you. A couple of questions came in on this particular topic about social distancing. So what social distancing protocols are in place, particularly in the middle and high schools? How are you keeping students safe given new CDC information about airborne transmission and the fact that in many classes they are unable to be seated 6 feet apart?
Thank you, Scott. As Dr. Nick mentioned earlier, approximately 60% of our students are in person. So that by itself has created space. And then he mentioned the tireless work of our site administrators, counselors, and teachers that have been working on the master schedule to take that 60% and try to distribute that equity across the board and trying to create an additional space in the classroom as well. And then as we drill down, when that is not able to take place, then we've done some separation through furniture changes, swapping out tables for student desks, those kinds of things. In addition to staggering passing periods, we've also changed the flow of traffic in the hallways to try to create one-way environments similar to what you would see out and about nowadays. In some situations, we've actually used TAs to split a class and have the teacher rotating back and forth between them. But overall, they've been very creative in their approach in maximizing space. Specific to the airborne question, we have increased our frequency of filter changes on our HVAC equipment. We've increased our MERV levels and maximized the MERV level for that particular equipment between an 8 to 13, depending on the age of the equipment. And then also increasing the air exchange, outside air along the way. So those things, but again, at the end of the day, it is still a school, and as much space as we create, some students are not always good about keeping their distance, and so in school and out of school. And so, as Dr. Nick mentioned, making sure that we give families that decision-making process as to whether in-person or a virtual experience is best for their family and their students. So.
Very good. So Justin, there's also been a lot of discussion, particularly lately, about enhanced cleaning measures. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, what enhanced cleaning measures are in place, and also what PPE and cleaning supplies have been provided to teachers. What's the status of existing PPE?
Yeah, thanks. And again, not specific to cleaning supplies or PPE, but I think it's important that we note also that the district went ahead and made sure that we had full-time nurses and nursing assistants at every one of our sites as we, distribute the PPE, that they are leads at their site. Of course, adding hand sanitizer to our hallways and common areas, in addition to some of the listeners actually may recall a couple of years ago, we worked with the Norman Regional Hospital during what at that time was a high flu season, and utilized the robots with the UVC light to treat a few of our schools. And so since then, we've actually purchased some, not the robot size, but actually portable units that we can actually move from site to site, that we can treat rooms that may actually have a student that was positive with the ultraviolet light. In addition to our electrostatic sprayers that our custodians are using at all of our sites, we've added touchless bottle filler options at the water fountains at all of our sites. So that's an option. We've added plexiglass to the reception areas. We've also worked with our custodial contract provider, Sodexo, and we've been able to focus on those high touch surfaces, making sure that we're disinfecting and sanitizing at the highest level than we ever have been. We're also in the classroom specifically providing hand sanitizer and or soap for those that have sinks. We've provided contactless thermometers. So we're checking our students' temperature as they're coming in. And after lunch also, we provided a disinfectant product. You mentioned about business leaders, think about shopping local. We were looking for one of the safest products out there that was effective against COVID, but safe around students. And we didn't have to look too far. Biocide is, as you know, a company, international company right here in Norman, and be able to sit across the table from the vice president and, not only talk about the product, but knowing that they have children in our schools, are you comfortable with this product being used around your students, your children? And with that, with affirmative answer, we felt good about making sure that we could use that product around students. And so we provide that for our teachers that, again, gives them the power to disinfect as frequent as they feel comfortable with between classes, in addition to the work that our custodians do at our site. We also began purchasing PPE back in April, and not knowing what the supply chains would be, but knowing that eventually our students and teachers would return. And so we have purchased face masks, some face shields for some special situations out there. We've got gowns, gloves, and other PPE that is available. And so being able to distribute that. And then, there was some confusion maybe folks heard about as far as, teachers weren't sure once they used that up, how they got new PPE or replacements. And so we've been able to go out to all of our sites, making sure that everybody understands that they can reach out to their school nurse or nurse assistant and site administrator for any additional supplies as again, we knew this going into it, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so, I think there also may be some confusion that we have a warehouse full of PPE. We have stored as much as we can, and they are located at health services and at warehouse. So I'm not going to say the warehouse is full of PPE, but we did not distribute everything that we had. We distributed for teachers' use, and then we'll continue to keep that and purchase along the way. Again, as we found out in these environments, you just don't know quite well how the supply chains will go. And so you want to make sure you have things in stock.
What if, Justin, what if my child shows up to school and negligent parent forgets to equip them with a mask for the day? What's the process there?
Yeah, so if a student comes to school without a mask, we provide one. And so whether that's a face covering or a disposable mask, we've got both on hand. So we distributed, again, the face coverings for both our teachers and students, but we understand, just like going to class without a pencil, we hand them a pencil. Coming to class without a face mask, we hand them a face mask.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, hopefully that clears up some of the questions that have been out there, particularly in the media lately about PPE. And are you guys accepting then PPE right now? I mean, if citizens wanted to donate or businesses wanted to donate, would that be an option?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like our school supply drive, and no student goes without school supplies, I assure you. But for those that want to donate or have drives, absolutely, we'll accept that. Again, I don't think you can have too much. And so, and I know the disposable face masks are those that folks like to donate, and we certainly will take however many they want to bring us.
Okay, very good. Okay, Holly, I've got a question for you, and this is dealing with our wonderful teachers here in Norman Public Schools. I understand that there's a virtual option which will help parents keep their children safe, but what about teachers who have no other option? Also, if teachers are feeling ill, COVID or not, and that's the probably challenging thing right now, right? We're all thinking about flu season or the common cold, that kind of thing. Are we at liberty, so I think this is speaking from the teacher's perspective, are we at liberty to use our sick days without being reprimanded?
So options definitely has been such a challenge, and we talk so frequently about options that families have and that our students have. And like most employees, our teachers' options are much more limited in their role as professionals because they have been asked to report back to work and to do this work. But for those that have health issues, we have worked to provide accommodations for them, and that has changed. That's an ongoing interactive process. When we were remote, I had a limited number of people that needed to be accommodated. As we've gone altered schedule and in person, that number has continued to grow. So hopefully giving them those accommodations so that they feel more comfortable doing the work that they need to do. In addition, we've been able to add more virtual sections, just pure virtual sections. We've learned a lot since we started in August with teachers doing both. And if that was just completely impossible, or the amount of virtual students we had, and making those shifts in our staffing to accommodate teachers, and working with teachers who had a preference, if possible, to be a virtual teacher, giving them that choice to be a virtual teacher. So again, they could feel most comfortable doing their work. So those are some of the options that are available to them. Again, they are not as robust by any means as the options we have for students in their role as employee, but wanting to constantly work with them to provide alternatives to make them feel as safe and as comfortable as we can doing this work. And of course, anyone who is feeling sick, who feels like they have symptoms of an illness, perhaps even feels like they have a family member who is ill that they've been exposed to, they should absolutely, in those cases, always take their sick leave, and there would be no penalty for that. I think where the confusion comes in, if it turns out to be COVID related, We always want our employees to apply for the Families First Coronavirus Act leave so that we can reverse out their personal leave, their accrued sick leave, and give them the federal leave that they are due for being absent for a COVID-related reason. So our goal from the outset was that we wanted to limit the use of our employees' accrued or personal leave, if we could, leaning into that FFCRA leave or FMLA leave. So again, yes, if you're sick, stay home. This is not the time to power through, soldier through. We say that to employees, we say that to our kiddos. But there are some alternatives to having to drain your own leave bank. And we've really tried to get that information out to our staff multiple times, personnel newsletter, but always they can call and ask if they have questions.
Holly, I think we were lucky to have some teachers engage with us through their questions. So a follow-up to that is the teacher, I think, sends the questions about them feeling safe, their ability to feel safe in the classroom. So they ask if I understand if some teachers don't feel safe going back into public settings, and for those who feel this way, I hope we can work out something for them. They expressed frustration. They felt this should have been worked out earlier this summer. So what's going to change to make teachers feel safe?
So I think there's so many layers to safety. I mean, the obvious is the fear of getting sick, the fear of infecting someone or infecting a family member. You know, first and foremost, a global pandemic working during that time induces anxiety and fear. I think we also have to realize that for our professional educators, there is such fear and anxiety that comes with the change in all that they are doing right now. By our very nature as educators, we want to make sense of things so that we can give something to students in a way that makes sense, that they can take, learn from, and apply somewhere else. We like to organize chaos, if you will. If you've ever been in a drop-off or pickup line, you know that these are routines and procedures that educators love to put in place to not only create safe spaces for students and families, but to know how we are doing business in a consistent way every day. So when you talk about safety, a lot of those things have been wiped away for our professional educators too. Trying to make sense and find consistency and routine in a time when nothing makes sense, nothing is consistent, and nothing is routine gives them great pause as well. I would also say that you know, they're learning a whole different craft at this point. So as you heard Dr. Nick say, we really went to school to be in-person teachers. There is a world of virtual learning out there that is robust and phenomenal. And I'm sure the people that do it well had a lot of time to prepare to do it well. Our teachers, speaking of June, as we're figuring out a learning management system to make that work, they had 10 solid days of learning how to be a virtual teacher before we said, on your mark, get set, go. And that's a foreign world for them. The other place they thrive in is relationships. So relationships are in person. And so now they're figuring out how to create those relationships, virtual relationships. Half my kids are here, half my kids are home, some I haven't seen at all. You know, we think back to the spring when their kiddos finally logged in after 2 weeks of spring break. It wasn't, hi, nice to meet you. It was, there you are, I've missed you. So it's a completely different game with what they're having to learn and do now. So I say all of that to say there's lots of shots at our employee safety right now. There's lots of things that have them off kilter and feeling like they're not doing their best, they're not feeling protected, they're not feeling healthy. So how do we fix that? The way we always have to fix those things. It takes time. And I will tell you, for our employees, it takes their voice and their action. There are no group of employees, in my opinion, that want to be hands-on doing the work more than teachers. And so we track back to late May, early June, inviting them into listening sessions. Scott, I know you were part of our back to school task force, having teacher voice there, and continuing to have meetings with them at the site level, coming up with their own site back to school plans. We've just finished going out to all sites and speaking to faculties, that in-person way that we can do with smaller groups of folks. And not only seeing themes across the district that they need to be reassured about, but also talking specifically to their site. And from that, we've seen sites create subcommittees where now they want to dig in and do the work that impacts their site. They're doing something, and I think they feel very empowered by that work, and I think safety will come. And we know with our kids, we have to meet their basic needs before we can do anything else. And the same is true of our adults. I think that time, maybe a little bit of consistency in an inconsistent world, and their ability to have their voice and be part of the solution will just continue to propel us forward to do our best during this time. We had a teacher at one of our meetings say, do parents understand that even when we come back in person, it's not going to look the same? Do they know that we're not going to be able to do like collaborative group projects, and I'm not going to be able to call their kiddo back to the desk and go through a paper, you know, side by side, hand in hand? We're going to have to do it differently. Are they going to be okay with that? And what I heard in that comment was, again, that concern that I'm not going to be my best self. And when I don't feel like my best self as a teacher, I don't feel really safe in what I'm doing. So again, that time to figure out what this looks like, and their voice in helping us now continue to move forward, and then whatever this looks like into second semester and potentially even into next year.
So Holly, you referenced a little bit of the communication that's going on right now between the district office and our teachers, and it's so important, and that's why the Chamber's been really honored to have, you know, to let this be the second conversation we've had around this school year. And again, our businesses, there's parents out there who are concerned, and so we've wanted to provide this venue for that. But teachers have a legitimate concern, and we have a lot of teachers in our district, thankfully. So for those that don't feel as if they have a voice, I think you enumerated a few ways for our teachers to communicate. But what can you tell us again, maybe what are some of those venues and opportunities? What are you doing as the district office to communicate, reach out, listen to, hear, you know, and to really engage the teachers during this challenging time?
Yeah, so as I said, we just finished a round of going out to all sites. Different sites had different teams of us there, and then we were able to come back together and again theme what we heard. And then there were some things, like I said, that were really specific to certain sites, and working with that administrative team and groups of teachers to make sure they had their needs met. And that will be ongoing. That's not a one and done adventure for us. We want to continue to go out each quarter and do those meetings, if not more frequently if needed. You know, everything is important when it's important. And so if there's a particular site that has a particular need and we need to go on site to hear that, we are at the ready to do that. But those will also be scheduled throughout the remainder of the year. Our student services office, elementary and secondary, based on the feedback from those meetings, they are creating COVID councils for our elementary teachers and for our secondary teachers, and they will bring them together to have conversations that are unique to different grade bands about what their needs are, what supports they still feel like need to be in place for them, what resources they still need to feel safe and to also feel successful. So can we do more? You can always do more listening and more talking and more input. And so we are open to all of those things, and we gain so much from it, and we are so appreciative of their input because they're the ones on the front lines doing the work. And so hearing from them and helping them be part of our planning has been our goal from the outset. And when we finally got through the spring and trying to figure out how to make the end of school year look somewhat reasonable, in the midst of this pandemic, that was always the goal, was let's get our professional workforce in here to tell us how we move forward into the fall.
So Holly, when this started, I think this all hit us initially as a physical reaction to a particular disease, right? And we were worried about the complications of that. But as school shut down, the economy shut down, life transitioned to something that none of us were familiar with, we quickly were alerted to the fact that our mental health was having challenges in a lot of different ways. So what support is available to students and staff who might be experiencing anxiety over COVID-19? They feel unsafe, constant challenges with the schedule that's changing. What resources are available to them?
Well, of course, for our students, all of the resources that we've always had in place, and we have counseling resources, we have wraparound resources that are available to them through Cleveland County Mental Health. We also have all of our partner agencies, particularly through United Way, that can assist families and students who may have a very specific need or concern that we need to address. The point person at a school site for all of that is a trusted adult, whether that's the teacher, the administrator, the counseling staff is always at the ready to assist or make those connections for families. For our professionals, for our support staff and our certified staff, obviously we want them to speak to someone that they trust, that they will be able to talk through what's going on with them with no implications other than to feel better. And so we've also established an employee assistance program. That is a partnership we have with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health, and we actually provide our employees with 3 sessions at no cost. And then through the partnership with mental health, they can refer them out if they need additional services from there. And all of that is covered on our employees' insurance as well. So really good resources both ways. I know our employees have information on how to access the employee assistance program 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And hopefully for our parents, if they weren't aware of who to contact and how to get assistance, hopefully we've been able to cover some of that here this morning.
Very good. So Nick, kind of going back to the decisions that are made to either be in class, be out of class, close the school or not, who's on the team that makes those decisions? And are there any parent representatives that are involved in that process?
Sure, absolutely, Scott. As always, I want to go backwards a little bit first. And, Holly talked about, inputs and feedback, and we can never have enough communication. One thing that I put in place a couple of years ago was a teacher council. And my teacher council, we're actually meeting again tomorrow, and in a similar format as this, although we're going to try to be in person, they have the opportunity to submit questions, and my cabinet will be on a panel to answer teacher-specific questions. The council that I have, we meet monthly, and it's made up of representatives from every single site in the district, plus our special services, fine arts, athletics. We have our union representatives on there. So we have a great cross-section, and the teachers are identified by their peers. They're actually our site teachers of the year, along with our district teachers of the year who have an ongoing seat on that council. So, from the beginning, that the inception of that council, that has provided incredible input on really what's going on in the schools. So, once again, I want to remind parents and everyone else that we do communicate as much as we can. We continue to try to get better, though. So with that, I'm really looking forward to that meeting tomorrow. I anticipate a lot of the same questions you're asking today will probably come from those teachers, and our hope is that gets disseminated back out to the sites. And the other piece around mental health, incredible situation and time we're in right now, where mental health, whether it's the little bitties or the adults, I mean, everybody is in crisis mode right now. Everybody's feeling the impact of this one way or another. And I want to reach out and say, we have these supports across this community. Internally, we have an incredible support, one with our counselors, but also with our foundation. And our foundation is looking at providing different resources and abilities for us to provide even more counseling options, mental health options for staff and students. And so I'd be remiss if I did not bring the Norman Public Schools Foundation into this conversation, because they are also integral in helping not just teachers in the classrooms with grants, but also many, many other things that we do, and they work behind the scenes in a great way. So I wanted to throw those pieces in, but can you ask me your question again, Scott?
Sure. So who's on the team that makes the decision to open or close schools, and are there any parent representatives involved with those decisions?
Absolutely. And, I mentioned earlier some of the scenarios we're in right now, and different scenarios that would close school. And obviously with electronic media, email, those kind of things, get tons of input and recommendations from people across the community, parents. But how it works is we take in all that input. So there are so many variables that go into whether we keep a school open or closed. Obviously, we follow the model, but then I work closely with my leadership team. We work closely with the sites, but we can't forget that we have a board of education that's representative of the community. And I work closely one-on-one with each one of those individuals in looking at closing a school if we have to, or keeping a school open. But I have to say, ultimately, my seat, I have to be the one to make that recommendation that we close the board or close the school with the support of the board. So I take into account all of the input I receive, whether it's emails coming in, conversations with site leadership if it's about a specific site, conversations with my leadership team at the district level and the board members. And then we have to make the best possible decision we can, knowing that it's going to impact, I'd say every school, thousands of people in so many different ways.
Very good. So Holly, the next question deals with something that I've noticed in the emails that I've received from my site principals where my kids are at school. And this says, how do you feel about having to send out pleas for volunteer substitute because so many teachers are sick?
I feel that substitutes and guest teachers right now are at a premium, not just in Norman, not just in Oklahoma, but throughout the nation, because so much of the specific group who chooses to be a guest teacher or a substitute in schools is impacted by COVID-19. Oftentimes they're retired teachers or they're older community members. And so right away, that's going to put a damper on your ability to have the amount of guest teachers that you would need in a regular school year, much less in a school year where you may have teachers out ill or in quarantine, or employees out ill or in quarantine. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for our partners, our business partners. I'm thankful for other community volunteers, parent volunteers that are willing to step up and stand in that gap for us and for our teachers and our students. We've seen an increase even in those who have applied to be official guest teachers with Kelly Services. We've had over 40 more people apply to be guest teachers in Norman just in the past 2 weeks, since we've been really working to push that information out both at the district and the site. And where that still doesn't get us to that number we would love to have in our guest teaching pool, again, even in a normal year, where we can fill that gap with volunteers. And like Dr. Nick said earlier, where you've had to limit access to volunteers for some things in our schools, this is a great opportunity to channel that volunteer spirit, that desire to help and to give back into a place where we really, really need it, where our teachers and our students really need it right now, which is in our classrooms.
Very good. Justin, earlier you mentioned Biocide, and I think there are Biocide and other businesses in Norman that the greater community often doesn't think about, because they're manufacturing certain things that often go around the country, if not the globe, and which is, I think, just amazing, and a great feather in Norman's cap to have businesses of that stature. Another one of those is Emmy. Emmy is a wonderful locally owned and operated business who is serving our state in big ways right now. I don't know about any of the three of you, but I had to go through their process of being tested, and it was quick, simple, and easy, and to be honest with you, painless to get done. But talk to us a little bit about Emmy, your partnership with them. Are they the sole provider for COVID test, or are you using other partners?
Yeah, so Emmy, as you mentioned, is really working across the state, and their contract is with the state, and it was through Governor Stett's initiative to provide monthly testing for teachers that allows us to actually bring in Emmy to our schools. They do provide the gold standard testing with the PCR, which we all can feel comfortable and confident in the results of. And so we're able to offer that to our staff at their specific sites once a month for those that choose to participate. However, in the in-between, whether a person chooses, a teacher or staff member chooses to go to Emmy located here in Norman, or to an urgent care or other location, that's fine too. But again, the agreement and the work is really provided through the state, not a contract with NPS specifically.
Very good. And I would encourage people, again, I went through that process. You can go to Emmy's website to schedule an appointment. So if you're needing to be tested, it's a free process, and it was a drive-through test that happened. You schedule it online, you drive through. I'll be as bold to say it's quick, almost as quick, if not quicker than Chick-fil-A drive-through. I mean, it's a really neat process that they have, and I'd encourage those that have a concern or looking to be tested to take advantage of that local opportunity. It's free. Okay, Justin, because we're getting close to the end of our hour here, so a few questions came in on this topic. How do you come to the conclusion that the best and most consistent plan for our students and staff was to send many people back into our school buildings while COVID rates are rising, and some science and medical professionals say that it's dangerous to open schools? And this continues to be the case. The numbers ebb and flow. If you're looking at the daily numbers, whether it be in Norman or the county level, state level, the transcript does a great job of reporting those every day. They ebb and flow. So how do you make the conclusion about the best and most consistent plan?
Yeah, I think Dr. Nick and actually Holly both kind of mentioned different pieces throughout this time we've had this morning. Our role and responsibility is to provide education to our students. And, we all know that we started off remote in the beginning as we were transitioning back from the summer break. We started seeing very early a lack of engagement from our students, that were not completing the work online, even with the best efforts of our teachers. We started hearing from the professionals around the issues of the reporting of child abuse and neglect going down, not because it's not happening, but because students are not in person, they're not in our schools, and it's not being reported. It was also, we saw the toll on our youngest students who are not able to work independently, and the stresses, you talked about the mental health, the trauma, the stresses, anxieties that are being placed on families, with the challenges of the job market. Maybe they're working multiple jobs, and so not being able to be that help, that home teacher, that resource for our youngest students in there. And then I would be remiss without acknowledging our students with disabilities and the impact there. The need for them to have the supports and that direct instruction from their teacher online, or not just online, but in person. And so those are the things that weighed into the decision to then transition to the alert system that we began putting in process, and with the Orange 1 and 2. But we saw as our numbers across the state, and you mentioned it earlier, Scott, about kind of pivoting back and forth, we saw that that had also a negative impact on our families as they were trying to secure consistent childcare opportunities, which is difficult with even a week's notice to know how that is. And then I think we've all experienced that to some degree, but and so that played into and translated into what we have provided now. And Dr. Nick mentioned that earlier, but really consistent in-person instruction, but still allowing that virtual option for those families that want to choose and are doing successful. We do have some students out there doing well. Holly mentioned, you know, not everybody is a virtual learner. For all of us that have taken a virtual class online, some of us have not been very successful, and others have. And so, you know, those that work from home do a very good job of that and are successful. People like me would not do so well. I don't have the discipline. So we know that, you know, that is a space that families and students thrive in, but we also know that that's something that our students, not all of our students, and as you heard Dr. Nick mention, 60% of our students really need that in-person opportunity to be successful. And so that was really the process that we went through in making those decisions.
Well, I've got one, I think we're going to not get to all the questions we had, which is not, I guess, not a bad thing because it showed the level of interest, but I'm going to end on, Nick, a funding question because I think this is really important. And I know we could take a whole nother hour talking about school funding formula. We're not going to do that. It's laborious, but give us the short version of the impacts, both federally and state, what it's going to mean to Norman Public Schools. You mentioned earlier, I mean, clearly we have fewer kids enrolled this year. What does that mean? You know, 60-40 split, and that may not impact funding, it may, but explain to us a little bit about federal funding, state funding, and are they dependent on the number of students enrolled or the number of students that are attending school under the traditional plan? Talk to us about some of those things before we wrap up.
In 1 minute, right?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, and Brenda Burkett, you know, our CFO, her ears probably perked up if she's on the call right now going, you know, I wish I could jump in and we could spend 2 hours talking about school funding. But, you know, I do have to say, Scott, you know, I've gone through the Emmy line twice, and, you know, getting my eyeballs tickled from the backside is, you know, it's a different feeling, but I've done it twice, and it is quick and it is painless. It's just a different feeling than I think we're used to. I just had to throw that in there. You know, federal funding, state funding, it is a big topic. A lot of people are curious how our enrollment has affected our funding. You know, you being at the state level for many years, you understand well, as much as anyone understand the funding formula. And one of the best things about the state formula and when it comes to funding is it gives school districts the ability to have a little comfort in what they're receiving. There's a 2-year model. Basically, from the state level, our funding is based off of our highest of the last 2 years enrollment. All of our funding is based off enrollment. So from the state side, last year was the first year in 5 years, I believe, that we had an increase in enrollment. So this year's funding will be based off of last year's enrollment. Now, what that doesn't take into account the value of each student, and depending on the economy and everything else, the value of each student is what we look at, and that's where we would get affected in the midterm adjustment. Now, when it comes to federal funding, I have to put a plug in real quick. If you haven't filled out the census, you need to fill out the census because what you do now is going to affect Norman Public Schools and every public school in the state for the next 10 years, essentially, when it comes to federal funding. But right now, when we look at enrollment, there is some confusion out there on, well, if they're virtual or if they're in person, does that make a difference? That does not make a difference. If a student is virtual or in person, we get funded and they count as a student for us. Other pieces of funding that are taken into account when it comes to federal and or state are our weighted students, whether they're students with special needs or our students who are gifted. Those students, we still need to serve, and that really impacts our funding as well. So really, the short of it is our enrollment from last year is what our funding this year is going to be based off of. The value of each student is going to be the unknown right now. Obviously, there are other schools in the news, and maybe more money will come back into the formula. Who knows? But with that said, we're in a pretty solid place. From the federal side, though, please fill out the census. It helps school districts, because that's the only way to get a true representation of who is in your community.
Got it. And I think it's important. I'm going to put in a plug for our local businesses. I think there's a lot of uncertainty going into this next legislative session as to the level of money, the amount of money they're going to have to appropriate for all agencies. So it's all based on enrollment and attendance and things, but that's not a unlimited cap of money. And so to help ensure that there are funds for the state legislature to appropriate, we need to all do our best as we're able to help support our local businesses. That's sales tax generation that occurs. And I can't think of a better time than right now to get out and support our local businesses. They give back. We talked about the premise of this whole breakfast is partners, and our local businesses partnering with our schools. But beyond the program that the Chamber has, our local businesses regularly partner with our schools to sponsor the jog-a-thon or to sponsor a banner in the outfield, on and on and on. And so each of us individually can be a part of that. And so I'd encourage each of us to do that and to support our local businesses, particularly now, but every day going forward. And just one last question. I wish there would be no more questions about this, but let's face it, I think, Holly, you said it, there's just a ton of uncertainty moving forward. And so while I wish that today's conversation would be the end all be all, it won't be. So if people have questions, if parents, patrons of the district have questions, what's the best way for them to ask those?
I'm assuming you addressed that to me, Scott.
Whomever. Yeah.
Okay. Is reach out to us. That's the best way. I will say, I'm trying to put this correctly in a politically correct way, but if you're receiving all your information through social media and it's not produced by Norman Public Schools and it leaves you with a question, I would say, please reach out and ask us directly. That's been one of the biggest challenges is for us internally is trying to correct some misinformation or information that's not completely correct out there. And that creates a burden and that creates anxiety in other people's lives. So if you have a question, reach out, because there is not a one size fits all for any of these scenarios. And what we do best is work with families on an individual basis for their individual situation. And so reach out and ask. And I don't know if you're going to give me the opportunity to say anything else, but I'm going to take this. And I know you're looking at the clock because I'm looking at it over your right shoulder there. Something we cannot forget in this time, and Justin mentioned this, is child abuse and neglect and the things we do. Our teachers in our schools are the eyes and ears of this community. And when child abuse counts, and those at Mary Abbott and other places will definitely probably confirm this if you wanted specific information, but the numbers of reports have gone down, but the severity of the cases has gone up. And that's something we have to be really conscious of. And so if you're in the community, if you see something, it's your obligation to report it, just like it's our obligation. And I ask you to do that, please. Volunteer. We need volunteers. We need support. We'll accept you. Reach out to our HR department and we'll get you set up there or your school site. And if you have questions, please just ask us directly.
Okay. Very good. Well, as we conclude today's session, and I apologize for those online for going a few minutes over our hour, but we appreciate the patience. There was just a lot of questions to get through, and we almost were able to answer all of them. Again, I can't say thank you enough to each of our sponsors for being part of today's breakfast. And I really appreciate our partners who regularly seek out an opportunity to work with our schools. And so, again, if you're a partner that's on the line today, reach out to your site principal and figure out a way to how you can engage with them this year. They want to hear from you, so please do that. And before we know it, we will all be back to normal, and it'll be regular as is. But for now, we need to continue to work to find ways that we can partner together for the betterment of our students and teachers and our entire school district. So thanks for everybody for joining us. Nick, Justin, and Holly, thank the three of you for being part of today's conversation. Not all of these questions were comfortable, but I appreciate your willingness to answer them and be upfront and honest with us. So thank you for that. Again, this program we recorded, so we will be putting it out there on our Norman channel, so Norman Chamber channel, so you'll be able to refer back to it if you have questions. So until then, everybody take care, be well, and stay safe. And we hope to see everybody soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.